Imagine walking through a valley of shadows, where everything you thought you could count on crumbles beneath your feet. The world feels cold, dark, and silent. In these moments, faith can seem distant, almost invisible. But what if I told you that it's precisely in these darkest days when faith becomes your most powerful ally? A strength, hidden deep within, that carries you when you feel you can't take another step. In the Bible, we hear about the valley of the shadow of death, Psalm 23 verse 4, a place of deep despair. Life sometimes drags us into these valleys, through loss, pain, uncertainty, but it is here, in the silence and the darkness, that faith whispers. We may not see the way out, but faith teaches us that God is still present, guiding us even when we can't see His hand. There will be times when it feels like the night will never end. But that's when faith steps in and reminds you of God's promises. I will never leave you nor forsake you, He says in Deuteronomy 31 verse 6. Holding on to these words is like grabbing a lifeline in the middle of a storm. The waves may crash, the winds may howl, but faith anchors you to something far stronger than the storm itself. Think of Job, a man who lost everything, his family, his wealth, even his health. He sat in ashes, surrounded by friends who doubted him. But even in his darkest hour, Job refused to turn his back on God. His faith wasn't blind, it was deep-rooted in trust. He knew that God's purpose was greater than his suffering. Faith teaches us to trust in the unseen, to believe that beyond the storm lies a purpose we cannot yet understand. Jesus said that if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains, Matthew 17 verse 20. This means that even in the darkest of days, when your faith feels small and fragile, it is still enough. Faith doesn't have to be grand or perfect, it just has to be present. Sometimes, all you need is the tiniest spark of belief, and God can turn that into something powerful. When Jesus and His disciples were caught in a storm, the disciples panicked, convinced they were going to perish. But Jesus calmly stood and rebuked the wind and the waves, bringing peace to the chaos, Mark 4 verses 35 to 41. In hard times, faith doesn't necessarily remove the storm, but it gives you the peace to stand firm within it, knowing that Jesus is in control. His power can calm any storm in your life. The darkest moment in history was when Jesus was crucified. The disciples thought all hope was lost. But 3 days later, the tomb was empty, and Jesus had risen. The resurrection is the ultimate symbol of faith in hard times. Even when it seems like death and despair have won, faith tells us that there is always hope beyond the grave. Through faith in Christ, even the darkest days lead to resurrection and renewal. Faith doesn't always show you the whole road, but it gives you enough light for the next step. It sustains you through the hardest times, reminds you of God's promises, and helps you believe in the goodness to come. In your darkest days, hold on to your faith. It's not the end of the story, but the beginning of a journey toward healing, renewal, and hope. When life feels unbearable, and darkness surrounds you, don't give up. Let faith be your guide. Hold on to God's promises, remember the examples of those who came before, and trust that He is with you every step of the way. Just like Job, just like the disciples in the storm, just like Jesus rising from the dead, faith can carry you through the darkest days.